As you know, on Sunday night or Monday morning of every week, we post a new expository semiotics explaining why we would choose which lectionary readings. But in these readings, our dream is and our desire is to help you read the signs and fondle the details and spot the seminal metaphors, the condensed signs and the stories that are key for preaching to a digital culture. So strap on your seatbelt and join us as we prospect our passages for today. Welcome to the 24th of July, 2022. This is the seventh Sunday after Pentecost, and our lectionary passages are Hosea 1, 2-10, Psalm 85, Luke 11, 1-13, which is the Lord's Prayer, and the story that Jesus tells immediately after the Lord's Prayer. And then Colossians 2, 6-15. And I want to read to you. I've become an addict of this translation of the Bible. It's the First Nations version, an indigenous translation of the New Testament. It has just come out, and I'm telling you, it's University Press has published it, and I'm reading the whole Bible. I may assign the New Testament in this First Nations version to my doctoral students just to have them reread the story in the vernacular of First Nations people. And I just want to read to you what the Lord's Prayer sounds like in a First Nations translation. And this is, Jesus in this translation is called Creator Sets Free. Isn't that great? So instead of get Jesus, you get Creator Sets Free. So another time after Creator Sets Free had finished praying. In other words, after Jesus had finished praying. And each one of the disciples has a specific name. For example, the name of John and Peter, and each one of them has a unique First Nations name. So I just want you to hear it, because I want to focus here for our meditation together in our semiotics. Verse 10, which is after the Lord's Prayer, but it comes in the story of the friend in the middle of the night and needing some bread. And this is how the NIV translates verse 10. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. So now this, but the problem is Native Americans didn't have doors. They didn't have doors like we have doors, wooden doors. And so how do you translate that into a First Nations version? And here, they had rituals at the door, at the gateways, at the tents. And here's how they translated verse 10. Keep dancing your prayers, and the way will open before you. Keep dancing your prayers, and the way will open before you. So I just want to read this, and then we're going to focus on the Colossians 2 passage. I'm going to read you again the NIV, a translation of it, into English, and then the First Nations translation of this passage that we're going to focus on. But here, I just want you to hear the Lord's Prayer in this First Nations version, an indigenous translation of the New Testament. Another time, after Creator Sets Free had finished praying, one of his followers said to him, Wisdom Keeper, teach us how to pray in the same way, gift of goodwill. Now that was John's name. So that's John. In the same way, John the Baptist taught his followers. Creator Sets Free smiled, or as Jesus smiled, and said to them, when you send your voice to the Great Spirit, here is how you should pray. O Great Spirit, our Father from above, your name is sacred and holy. Bring your good road to us. where the beauty of your ways in the spirit world above is reflected in the earth below. Provide for us day by day the elk, the buffalo, and the salmon, the corn, the squash, and the wild rice, all the good things we need for each day. Release us from the things we have done wrong. In the same way, we release others for the things done wrong to us. And guide us away from the things that tempt us to stray from your good road. Doesn't that just want you to read it over and over and over again? Now the Colossians passage, I just want to focus on one particular section here. And this is at the very end of the reading for today, Colossians 2, 6 to 15. And I want to read you the verse 15 in the NIV, which is what I've been used to, although I did memorize it initially as a kid in the King James. But here's the NIV. God stripped the spiritual rulers and powers of their authority. With the cross, God won the victory and showed the world that they were powerless. Okay, so now here is verse 15 in the First Nations translation. Are you ready? We start with verse 6 and we go to verse 15. It's called the Victory Dance passage. This is how the Great Spirit, through what the Chosen One did on the cross, defeated the spiritual powers that ruled over us by using our tribal law to accuse us and hold us captive. He now dances the victory dance with us for the whole world to see, to celebrate the defeat of those powers. Now, let me just put them back to back. God stripped the spiritual rulers and powers of their authority. With the cross, he won the victory and showed the world that they were powerless. Here is the First Nations translation. This is how the Great Spirit, through what the Chosen One did on the cross, who now dances the victory dance with us for the whole world to see, to celebrate the defeat of those powers. I love that. First of all, we're dancing our prayers, and second, we're dancing the victory dance with Jesus over the victory, Christus victory, the victory he won on that cross. And as he emerged and bolted and out of that veil in the Holy of Holies and out of that tomb on resurrection morn. But clearly, that victory that has been already won, we are still living in the overlap of what has been done and what is in the process of being fulfilled, the commentary on what has already been done in the already but not yet. How do you convey that we are living, the power of sin and death have been conquered, they've been released, but they still have a hold on us. And I've been struggling with this all week and trying to wrestle with what, and I want to talk about in-betweeners. We are in-betweeners. We live in a state of in-betweenness. And to be a disciple of Jesus today is to be an in-betweener. We're living between two ages. We're in the world, but we're not of it, because we're of this world that where sin and death and the grave have been conquered and victory has been won. So we're dancing the in-between dance. Okay, we're celebrating a victory that has already been accomplished, but living in the overlap now of what is and knowing yet what is to be. This overlap of the ages. We are the already but not yet people. We are in-betweeners. And we know that death has been conquered and sin has been vanquished, and and the grave has no power over us. But we also know that death will overtake each one of us. O grave, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting? Is how Paul put it. So we are the in-betweeners people. Now this metaphor of in-between, kind of between two worlds, I first got it from John R. W. Stott, who wrote this classic text on preaching. It's called Between Two Worlds, and it still sells. It's still used as text in homiletics courses. But the Between Two Worlds he's talking about is the biblical world and the contemporary world. I'm talking about the world that we are in now, where we're having to deal with all these powers and principalities, and the world that has already been won through Jesus, that Jubilee world, but that we are not yet in it, but we are really of it. You can tell we're not yet in that world. We're in it. We're in between people. When you just look at, I was just going through kind of what were some of the screen shows on Netflix and Amazon Prime and Showtime and Cinemax and all that stuff. And look at what people are watching right now. Resident Evil on Netflix. It started out as a Japanese horror game, by the way. Became the highest grossing horror franchise. Now is this Netflix special, Resident Evil 3. We even got 3 seasons of it. By the way, the highest grossing live action video game film series ever, Resident Evil. And then there's just Evil, an IMDb special a few years ago. And then there was another one called Most Evil. And then we have Lucifer. And that's a whole other conversation about where is Lucifer, what is Lucifer, how do we get the name Lucifer? And then, the Making of a Monster on Channel 4 and BBC. Ghislaine Maxwell. Jesus, you start looking at it, I couldn't finish it. Geez, her name is Ghislaine, and I'm going, geez. So this is a world where there is Resident Evil. There are the Ghislaines that give us the heebie-jeebies and make us go, geez. There is horror out there. There is the power of demonic powers and principalities. They're still at work, even though they have been conquered. And so how do we navigate this in between this? And one way we don't navigate it, we don't navigate it by singing the song that we learned as a child, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. You go with the stream, you go down the stream, especially down the main stream. And you're no longer in between. You're living in the world, and you become of the world. Not the world to come, but the world that is still here. What in-betweeners do is we row differently. Row, row, row your boat gently. I don't say gently, faithfully up the stream. We're not going down the stream with the tide. We're not following the currents. We're not just in the mainstream. We are rowing faithfully up the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is God. Sweet dreams. That's where the sweet dreams are. It's the dream of the kingdom. It's the dream of Jubilee. The kingdom of God dream. Not the world dreams. And as the world dreams, but as Jesus dreams. The kingdom of God is God's dream for the world. And so we resist the downward drift, not merrily down the stream. or gently down the stream, but faithfully up. We're salmon people. We're always going against the current, against the tide. And we don't stay in the mainstream. By the way, anybody doing semiotics, you don't see the future from the center. You don't follow and understand where the future is coming from the mainstream. Stay in the mainstream, and you will streamline folly and foolery. The only way you can see and participate in the future, in this world to come, is to get out of the center. Stay in the center and stay clueless. Go to the margins, go to the periphery, go to the edges. And that's where the future is forming. Faith is in the front, but the front not going downstream, but the front going upstream. And you know how you row there? You row by trusting the past to guide you into the future. You're always going into the future, but you're looking to the past to guide you and guard you as you row into the future. It's not that you're yearning for the past because you're going the opposite direction from the past, but you're using the past as a guide and a guard. Or reread Hebrews 6, the anchor that you hoist in front of you, that you throw out. It doesn't keep you from moving. You cast it into the future, that rope of hope, and you hold out for dear life. And that's how you move upstream as an in-betweener. And there are other ways that we have to make sure that we protect ourselves from being swept downstream and going with the flow. The only flow you go with is the flow of the Spirit, which is taking us upstream, not downstream. I love my father figure to me for many years. His name was Richard Zimmerman. He was the CEO of Hershey and Hershey Foods, and he became the chair of my board when I was president of United, and he and I became very dear friends, and he became literally, my father died when I was very young and in my early 20s, and Dick Zimmerman became really a surrogate father to me. He and Nancy were just some of my most favorite people in the world. You have a CEO who loved Jesus and of a corporation, but he would tell some of the stories of the battles that he would have with other chocolate dynasties around the world. But the one that he respected the most was Mars. They were tough, he said. It's a family-owned company, worth about $96 billion today, I guess. It's a company that's actually bigger than Coca-Cola. And today is Generation 4, G4, that runs the board and continues on the family tradition of very strong privacy, but a very strong ethic of responsibility and egalitarianism. And the story of this dynasty, chocolate dynasty, is that it started in 1920s in Chicago, where the Mars Bar was born. And there's a wonderful story about how that happened. But in 1935, Mars decided to buy a company that made tinned dog food in tin cans, and it was called Chappie. And that has grown, so that now Mars, when you think of Mars, you think of Mars bars, Mars candy, but actually the greatest wealth for this company comes from its dog food. And Mars feeds half the world's pets. Biggest brand, Royal Canin. But the whole company is based on moving into this future as a family company on what they call the 5 principles. Now, some people call this stakeholder capitalism, but I love these 5 principles: quality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency. I'm not a big one on that one, but that's another story. Freedom. Let me give them to you again. Quality, responsibility, mutuality. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. efficiency. And the last one is freedom. And that's how they move into the future. They guide themselves as they row upstream, but they guide themselves by these 5 core principles that provide their rearview mirror as they're going forward. And the rubber hits the road with a practice that they still continue today, that when they introduce a new product for their animals, for pets, the board sits around the table and they all get out a little spoon or whatever, and they taste the dog food to make sure that they are continuing this tradition of quality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency, and freedom. If you're on the board of this family-run company called Mars, at board meetings, you may not have a pate to taste. You may have some dog food that has to pass muster with the board. We all grow. And as we grow older and older, I think we come closer and closer in this in-betweenness to the world that already is, but is yet to come. The but not yet, but already is world. And you can find this in the scriptures. I have a friend, Leonard Level, who sent me this week a passage, and I had read this book before, and I don't know how I missed this, but Peter Scazzaro, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, talks about how Paul grew closer and closer as his walk with Jesus took him further and further upstream, and it didn't get easier for Paul. But his spirit got sweeter, and he became more and more of this world that is already, but is yet not here, and less of the world that already is, as he did the dance of faith and victory over the resident evil world. In his letter written to the church at Galatia, he comments on other apostles this way: as for those who were held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. This is Galatians 2:6. In other words, you're reading here, I mean, Paul, I think this is a whole, I mentioned this on another LenTalk, that I think Paul's thorn in the flesh was his realization that he was untimely born, as he puts it here in 1 Corinthians 15, and that he should have been one of the 12. That's why he insists that one of the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus occurred to him and appeared to him, because to be a disciple, you had to be an apostle. You had to have that post-resurrection encounter with Jesus, and he had one on the Damascus Road. So there's a little sense of competitiveness, as for those who were held in high esteem, meaning the other apostles, of which he was not technically one. Whatever they were makes no difference to me. And then, now Paul wrote this in 49 AD. So he'd been a Christian for like 14 years. And then here's 6 years later, 55, he writes the Corinthians. This is 1 Corinthians now. I am the least of the apostles. So now there's a competitiveness with them, and then he's kind of arrogated to himself the position of being one, even though he wasn't technically one, but I'm the least of the apostles. And 5 years later, this is AD 60, he says, this is Ephesians 3:8, I am less than the least of the Lord's people. He's not just the least of the apostles, he's less than the least of. And then here, 2 years before his death. Now, he'd been walking with Christ now for 30 years. And this is what he says. This is what he says. This is in 1 Timothy 1:15. I am the worst of all sinners. Oh, can you sense this growth in grace and this growth in the in-betweenness, but tilting now towards the world that already is, but is yet to come. Paul grew in his understanding of God and himself, and in that in-betweenness. And I think too, Peter also grew. You can see this. Remember, they're in the boat. Jesus' head's on a pillow. In other words, the pillow is saying, you don't take a nap with a pillow. You crash with a pillow. And he's saying, do not. He's got this pillow. It says, "Do not disturb" sign. And the storm comes up. Oh, they're in the boat with Jesus. What harm can come to them? They're in the boat with Jesus. But the disciples freak out. And when they can't take it anymore because the storm's really getting rocky and the boat is rolling. And Peter goes, I'm sure it was Peter, the head of the disciples, he goes down, wakes, he's a master. Don't you care that we perish? And as he shakes Jesus awake, don't you care that we perish? Carest thou not? And here's Peter much later, 1 Peter 5:7. Cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. Cast all your cares on him. He cares for you after a lifetime of serving Jesus and living with Jesus. It's all. And what this is the ultimate thing, sisters and brothers, that brings us through that state of in-betweenness is the North Star, or if you're down under, the Southern Cross, where we guide, we navigate. We don't need a map. We just need a navigational skills. And we navigate from that fixed point of that North Star, who is Jesus, the star of Bethlehem. There's a movement today to take Jesus out, replace that North Star with all sorts of other stars. Some good, some not so good. I think of Robert W. Funk, who founded the Jesus Seminar. Now this is a group of scholars, biblical scholars, and I studied under some of them who were part of this Jesus Seminar. And the idea was we are going to decide together what were the actual sayings of Jesus in the Gospels and what worked. And it was so ironic to me. They were doing this by using the historical critical method. And they thought that they could actually, through historical critical method, decide which were the authentic sayings of Jesus and which weren't. And you know how they resolved the differences between them? Majority rule. So they all had a vote, and they would vote, and whichever position had the most votes of those in the Jesus Seminar, I'm going, this is one way to do science, majority rule. You guys think of yourselves as you got historical, critical, scientific method here, and what rules is the majority. But he had really some really good. I mean, he had gospel parallels, which I think was putting them all together in parallel form. He didn't. This was like a Tatian's diatessaron in the 4th century. It was a massive achievement. But then he got heady here, and he can tell what's Jesus and what's not Jesus, and you don't trust the scriptures anymore. And then there's this. I mean, this says it all about where we are today. He died about 15 years ago, but the Jesus Seminary that he started, is the spirit of it is still here. And he has 21 theses. The Robert W. Funk's 21 theses. You can look them up online. But number 6, Jesus himself is not the proper object of faith. Making Jesus the object of faith would be to repeat the idolatry of the first believers. And then there's this number 7, but this is number 8. Give Jesus a demotion. We might begin by turning the icon back into an iconoclast. And that's what we've done. The church has all too often today. And that's why we're stuck in this state of in-betweenness, not tilting towards the edge of the world to come, but tilting toward the edge of the world that is. Because we've just given Jesus a devotion. He's one of many things and to talk about and to lift up, and there are a lot of good things out there, and so we really don't need to spend time focusing on him or preaching him, because we really need to just let off Jesus a bit. Let's give him a demotion. Are you serious? To preach the gospel is to preach Jesus, because Jesus is the gospel. The good news is the gospel, but the gospel is not principles and practices. The good news is a person whose name is Jesus. And Jesus is that light at the end of the tunnel that calls to us and brings us and pulls us in this tunnel of in-betweenness toward the future, toward the light of God's kingdom. We move through the world, as T.S. Eliot put it, with the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling. Is the love still being drawn in your life? Is the call still calling you? The voice of this calling, can you still hear it? Is the calling still ringing in your ears? Have you lost the call? Is the call still heard long and loud in your life? Or has the call, that voice, the voice of the call, and the vision, the drawing of love, the vision of love and the voice of the call, are they still there? That's what brings us and keeps us rowing our boat upstream in this state of in-betweenness. So we keep dancing our prayers. Or as the First Nation version puts it, keep dancing your prayers and the way will open before you. Keep dancing your prayers. Because when you keep dancing your prayers, you dance the victory dance. From one in-betweener to another. Keep dancing your prayers and dancing the victory dance.